In today's video, I'm going to talk about the two types of the inner wounded child we all have. These are critically important to understand because these will show you exactly how your false persona was developed, how your codependence was developed, why your relationships are chaotic. It's going to give you tremendous insight into why you became the person you are today and how your worst day cycle got created and where you need to start looking to begin the healing process so you can reclaim your authentic self, you can bring in love and connection into all of your relationships and reach, your desired outcomes that we all want in life. So there are two basic wounded child states. The first is the wounded child, and the second is what's called the adapted wounded child. Okay, so the wounded child is created in the first 5 years of life, and a child at this age is not fully developed cognitively, and therefore they can't process what's happened to them. Okay, they can't form words. Well, between 3 and 5 we start to be able to, or 2 and 5 we start to be able to form words, but we're still learning about concepts. We're developing emotional imprints and concepts and learning how to anticipate and understand the world. So we generally don't have words for the experiences that we go through in these first 5 years of life. So this is critical because have you ever noticed that when you get stressed, which is fear, by the way, you get scared, anything happens in your life, sometimes you go blank, you go numb, you don't know what to do? Well, that's an indication that the wounded child in you has just been triggered. Those early, less than nurturing, and what I call abusive, I call them abusive experiences in childhood at the hands of our caregivers, and I call them that because the result is we don't have a healthy relationship with ourselves, and we're unable to form healthy relationships with others. And so it's not to blame parents. It's not, in almost all cases, it was never their intent to be abusive. People get hung up on that word, abusive. I'm not saying your parents are bad people and they're abusive, like they set out to hurt you, because that's the connotation we have. But the result, it's because of the result. That's why I term it as abusive, because it has such an impact on our life. So when we go through if you want to call it less than nurturing, that's fine, or even abusive experiences in the first 5 years of life, what happens is the child becomes flooded with feelings. They shut down. And as a result, you may not remember a specific trauma or abusive event. You just can't put words to it. Well, in part because our brains haven't formed enough to put words to it. Then you add in the overwhelming nature of it, the flooding that goes on. And so all of that shows an indication of abandonment, neglect, and direct or indirect messaging that you had no worth. You were shamed as a child. We've all been shamed as a child. We've all been abandoned at times. We've all been neglected. That's just normal parenting. Parenting is, when you investigate what it takes to be a healthy parent, you'd realize it's absolutely impossible. It's impossible to not leave abandonment, neglect, and shame in our children. And so that's the first thing. We have to get into reality that all of us have abandoned our kids. All of us have neglected our kids. All of us have shamed our kids. That is abuse. It doesn't mean we're abusive, bad parents. It's just reality. And all of these have consequences, and our parents did it to us. So this is not about blame or saying anyone's bad. This is just about truth. And what is truth? We all go through this. And the only way we can heal is we have to start calling things what they are. We have to start living in truth. So we all have a wounded child within us. We all went through painful experiences in the first 5 years of life. Now, this type of experience will almost always mirror the disempowered parent you're raised by. In almost all families, there's usually a disempowered and a falsely empowered parent. Sometimes you have two disempowered and two falsely empowered. Like I have a client right now, both parents are disempowered. They constantly fall apart. She's in her 30s and they're constantly making her take care of her. They're both disempowered. And so when you are in this, the wounded child in you will mimic that disempowered parent. So you'll tend to feel bad, inadequate, shame-based, self-loathing. There'll be worthlessness, you'd be susceptible to being very vulnerable, helpless, powerless, needy, dependent, chaotic. You'll feel less than most people. You'll feel one down. You'll be boundaryless. You'll puke yourself too much information or can't contain your inner thoughts and feelings. You're out of control, meaning you can be too controlling or lack control, have the inability to say no. You have addictions present, like there's no containment in your life. Overwhelmed and flooded, dissociative, and these are the feelings that the disempowered parent has transferred into you in those early stages of life. Now, in most cases, both parents have this disempowerment side. So in most cases, both parents dump this stuff into us. And so when we are feeling all of those things, the helplessness, powerlessness, all the craziness and chaos that we all experience, more than likely, these are events that happened in the first 5 years of life. We couldn't make sense of them. We didn't have cognition. That's why we're blank, numb, dissociative. That's why we say, I don't know all the time. Like, are you starting to see how when that side of you comes up, this is where it was created. Now you can see why it's so important, because this lets you know in relationships, friendships, when you watch me and you get triggered, all these different things. Oh my gosh, this is all the first 5 years of life. This is where I learned it. This was mom. This was dad. Oh my God, life is starting to make sense now. I can see why I have this false persona. Oh my God, I'm starting to understand what he's saying, that none of us are authentic. We have to go back and heal the worst day cycle. Like, everything starts to make sense when you start to grab onto this deeper information. Okay, so this explains why as an adult you have no words, you go blank, you go numb. Since as a child, this stage of you were developing language and processing skills, and so you are stuck. All right, and that's the whole goal of everything I teach, is to get you out of that. And the first step is awareness. Oh my God, this is where it comes from. Remember, we need knowledge so we can then learn new skills that then become tools. So this is the knowledge part, getting into reality of this is why I became this way. All right, so some of the major characteristics of the wounded child state and the parent that created that in you is, and you'll feel these now as an adult, is you feel frightened, helpless, blank, sense of spinning if things get too much, overwhelmed, flooded, just, that's that overwhelmed sense. Dissociative, just off, numb, don't feel anything, don't notice anything, just shut down. All right, worthless, vulnerable, feel bad about yourself. You'll have magical thinking and fantasies. These are the love addicts, and this is the Tinder swindler women who fall for all of that. Filled with shame and self-loathing, feel powerless and needy and dependent and chaotic, less than, one down, boundaryless, out of control, fearful of the world, of anything new. This is going to upset a lot of people, but COVID, everyone's overreaction to COVID is a direct result of this. Complete powerlessness. I mean, none of this affected kids, and yet we're putting masks on children. It's just, this is purely, those are people who are caught in the wounded child state, acting out of that in so much fear, and now they're going to put masks on kids that don't even need it. All right, more people died of the flu. We've never masked for the flu, and the flu was more dangerous than this on kids. That's parents, the adults in this world, acting out of their wounded child state and dumping all of that unrealized fear into the whole world of kids. It's tragic what's happened. All right, fearful of anything new, blame focused when they're in this place. This person is always looking to blame somebody else or the world. They feel the world is against them. They embody the role of the victim. They just, like, they're going to get really upset at what I just said about COVID and everything because they need to be the victim. They need somebody to be the victim. They can't look at that. They're that, and this is going to sound really hurtful. How can I say this loving? Have you ever seen a child just completely overrun and they can't make sense of life? Well, maybe it was in the grocery store and it's just the world is too much. That's this person. They may be 40 years old, 60 years old, but they're that little 3, 4, 5-year-old who's just lost it. Now, that's not to say that they're a 60-year-old child, but in these moments they are. Well, that's heartbreaking. That's not a judgment. That's nothing to belittle them. That's tragic that our society won't talk about these things and give them the skills and tools so they don't have to be that 3, 4, 5-year-old who's just lost it and they're 20, 40, 60 years old. That's just... It's just tragic that our world is so detached from reality. We don't want to talk about this stuff and we don't want to heal it, and we get defensive and angry and shut out this truth. That's just my reality. So at any rate, my heart breaks for you. I'm not here to judge you. I'm trying to help you out of that. I'm trying to embrace you and hug you and go, it's okay. Nobody listened to you. Nobody understood you. They just shamed you and said, grow up. Don't act that way. Well, I'm trying to lovingly bring you into reality of you're still stuck there, and that's okay, and it's not your fault. You're not to blame. But the only way out of it is to talk truth and to bring you into reality that this is what's happening, and this is how our adults are reacting poorly to all of these decisions and why we have wars and all these things. We have a bunch of wounded children making decisions, and to me, we need to start talking about that. And I'm trying to do it lovingly, okay? They're also desperate and demanding to be needed, loved, and valued. That's all that little child is rolling around on the floor. They're just screaming and demanding to be needed, loved, and valued. And that's what these overreactions are by these adults. Sadly, they're also in very, very high denial and completely out of reality and unaware of it. They will really push back at most everything I just said. They can't grasp it because emotionally they're stuck. They don't have the cognitive processing skills to accept the reality. They are in that wounded child state, even if they're 60 years old with 3 degrees, masters and everything. Remember, we feel before we think. Our intellect is really predicated on our emotional ability, on our ability not to shut off the right side of our brain and stay in our left. What kills us is being stuck in our left. Intellect comes from our ability to tap into our deeper emotional core, and because we lack emotional mastery in our culture, our most educated and supposedly the people that are meant to lead us are underdeveloped in this area, and they're setting policy and making decisions that are harmful to us all, and they're in massive denial and can't see it. They're hurt, and they're completely unaware of it, in part because nobody's ever talked about it, and that's why I do it. Another interesting characteristic of this side of the dynamic of the wounded child is this is generally where you'll find the empaths. And this is how empaths become attracted to narcissists. It's usually from the wounded child abuse that they suffered. These people that are attracted to narcissists are struggling with what's called carried shame. This happens when a parent, usually by yelling at that 3 or 5-year-old rolling around who's lost containment, usually yells at them and dumps their own self-loathing into the child, all right? Now, the empath isn't aware of this because they're in that precognition stage. And so they're an adult going, no, Kenny, I have a gift. This isn't about trauma. Well, I don't want to deny that you have a gift, but your gift is working against you, not for you. It's destroying you. And so to me, that's something I personally would look at and maybe go, instead of trying to get the world to change, I need to look at healing within myself. Because by not doing that, and by not recognizing that the way you were raised and having this carried shame dumped into you, you didn't have the boundaries. And so all of that shame inside your parent, it pierces your boundaries. And you as a child consumed all of your parents' pain, because as a society, we don't, if you haven't watched my video on how society creates codependency, please go watch it, because this is all, we've all just keep carrying and passing down this shame. And so that's why they're susceptible. The empath is susceptible to manipulation and the crazy making tactics of the narcissist, because that's what happened to them as a child. They're stuck in this wounded child state. So just like a child, they're consumed and their feelings don't match their thoughts. They think the narc's feelings and thoughts and interpretations are true and accurate because they're still caught in that carried shame of childhood. They haven't matured out of it. Again, it's not to be disparaging. It's what happens to all of us. You've seen me on camera act. I've acted that way and called myself out on it, where none of us are immune from it. It's part of the life experience. We just have to get into reality that we're perfectly imperfect, and it's okay that we have these moments. This is the same for the empaths. They were so disempowered by the induced and carried shame that they can't protect themselves. Therefore, they become whatever the person is feeling and often confuse their own feelings from the person next to them or that's around them as their own. They've lost the ability to protect themselves. That's what shame does. We are disconnected from our authentic self. We are now stuck in the adapted wounded, well, this is the wounded child. I'm about to talk about the adapted wounded child. And this is where you're going to see the false persona. And for empaths, this is generally a false persona. That they are so consumed, they got separated from themselves. They can't protect themselves, okay? And so now they're stuck in this, and so it's an adaptation that they have no containment. All right? Now, this isn't to disparage them. They're not bad people. They just are overwhelmed with trauma. Okay? Now, something to recognize. If you identified with all those characteristics of flooded and that disempowering aspect and the victim and out of touch with the reality and having to blame somebody, high denial, all those different things of the wounded child, recognize, all of us, take that wounded child and we morph it into what's called the adapted wounded child. This happens once we develop logic and reason, okay? This happens between the ages of 6 and 17. So the adapted wounded child happens after the first 5 years. It happens to all of us. This is where we figure out in our childhood, in our, family system, okay, this is how I'm going to survive, and this is how I'm going to develop my false self and false adaptations to navigate my family dysfunction. And now we all confuse that and believe it's our authentic self, our authentic values, it's who we are. And this is why the science proves out 95% of our adult life, we're not present. We're just reliving our subconscious imprinting, and 70% of that was negative and disempowering. Well, that's the wounded child state. 0 to 5 years, 6 through 17, it continues. Now we have logic and reason, and so we've taken those life experiences. We remember how if you don't know how emotions are created, go watch my video, How Emotions Are Made, and I show you it's from these early life experiences, the environment and the culture you're raised in, and our physiology, all of that gets dumped into us, and now we have enough brain development that we start to go, oh, okay. So this is how I'm going to be, this is the person I'm going to become so I can survive the dysfunction in my home. And it's either going to be disempowered, falsely empowered, or a mix of both. Usually a mix of both, okay? So, what you'll find is in the adapted wounded child, this is where the depression, shame-filled, worthless and alone starts to happen. They get perfect. They start to focus on others for approval. Now this can be either, they can be the disempowered caretakers or the falsely empowered achievers. But it's all predicated on getting approval. Do you see both of those? The so-called super achiever ones, you know, it's like, oh no, they've got it together. No, they're still codependent. They've just gone the polar opposite way to satisfy their codependence. The dysfunction in their family, they want, wait a minute, I see what happens to you as the disempowered child. I'm going to be the falsely empowered. I'm going to be the super achiever, so mom and dad quit yelling at me and don't shame me as much. Yet I'm still filled with shame because if I don't achieve, I'm not going to get recognized. So it's still a shame-based system that's driving them, okay? So they're still worthless and alone. They have to be perfect. They focus on others for approval. They learn to hide their thoughts and feelings, and they begin to learn the skill set of manipulating. And one of the main ways we learn to manipulate is to learn how to manipulate ourselves. We go into denial. We won't see the truth, and that's why all of these things that happen throughout our world, we can't admit to and see that this is what's created all of this, okay? So now, if they experience if the adopted wounded child, if they experience falsely empowering abuse, okay? Now this could be, you know, they could be the golden child, or they had to take care of a parent, something that placed them in the role of having too much power as a child. They'll be filled with fear, confusion, rage. They'll be walled off from other people. Generally, they'll have difficulty opening up about their feelings or let people close to them, or they'll be shy and reserved. They're walled off and or walled in. And this is the denial. This is, narcissism gets here. I can't let anyone or anything near me. I won't share who I am. I don't even know who I am because I'm so walled off and walled in from myself. All right? Where was I? They'll be aggressive. Better, and this can be, sarcasm gets developed here. People think sarcasm is funny. Sarcasm is not funny. Sarcasm is veiled anger and rage. It comes from the Latin root to tear the flesh. Our culture, see, here's a culture thing. Our culture teaches, instead of being able to deal with your authentic feelings and emotions, be sarcastic, hide, manipulate, be falsely empowered, and use sarcasm to cut people apart. But it's funny. Boom, is that a great falsely empowered manipulative tactic? To be aggressive and better than somebody else. They're uptight and controlling. If they've experienced disempowering abuse, they will be compliant, enabling, manipulative people pleasers. These are the people that kill people with their kindness. And I know people don't like it when I say this. Bradshaw came up with this and it was brilliant. The nice people, the people pleasers, there's a veiled sadistic quality to it. And here's what's sadistic about it, is they go around telling everyone and everybody how nice they are. And they are not, they do all these nice things. But underneath it, if they don't get seen, rewarded, or noticed, man, they'll get you. And that's the hidden sadistic nature to it. And they're in denial. They don't want to admit, no, I'm nice, I have to be nice. And it's hiding all of that rage at how they had to give themselves away and develop a false persona of, I'm the nice child in my family, I'm the people pleaser. But underneath, I stew with rage, resentment, that nobody notices me, nobody gives to me as much as I give to them. You see, there's the sadistic, I'm better than, because I'm nicer. That's sadistic, because it's manipulative, it's used, because it'll come out in sarcasm and cutting words and cutting actions. The niceness is always a veiled, it's hiding how much pain they experience, the wounded and adapted wounded child within them, all right? Now, the falsely empowered side, remember the wounded child mimics the disempowered parent. Well, the falsely empowered or the adapted wounded child mimics the falsely empowered parent. They will be angry. This is when you're anger and shut down, you're walled off, uptight, controlling, better than, one up, all powerful, aggressive, judgmental, perfectionist, hide your feelings and manipulate to get what you want. So children develop either a disempowered or a falsely empowered personality, or a mix of both, dancing between. That's me. I'll just be honest with you. I'm both. I was, until I figured this out, no wonder I had very few friends. And even now, you see it come out. I see it come out in my videos. It's crazy making inside of me, trying to navigate all this and heal from it and recognize, my gosh, my dysfunction is everywhere. Man, is it so much better than it was. But I bounce between both extremes all the time, and both disempowered and falsely empowered. And that's what I had to do to fit into my family system. My father was falsely empowered, my mom was massively disempowered, but they both manipulated from the disempowered and falsely empowered position, like every parent does. And so this is what happens. A lot of people will misidentify a narcissist when really this is just severe codependence. That's manipulative and all this stuff. Narcissism, like true narcissists, there's no gray area. Like it's all day, every day. And what most people are calling narcissism is really severe codependence. Our society is just severely disempowered and falsely empowered. And because nobody teaches about the falsely empowered, people just go, oh, that's a narcissist. Oh no, that's a falsely empowered codependent. Now, if just like I was saying, if you experience the disempowering abuse in those later stages, this is where you become the enabler and you refuse help and you become passive aggressive, okay? If it was falsely empowering, you get a child who's masquerading as a grown adult. They pride themselves. These are the teenagers or even young children. They pride themselves on being mature, yet they are an adult wounded child. And so many parents, I run into it all the time, parents telling me, I meet them in person and how great their 9-year-old, how adult they are and mature they are. And I'm just sitting there going, oh, this poor child. These parents don't know that they've raised a falsely empowered child. They're, talking about how a 9-year-old can do things an adult should do. They've lost their childhood. Parents are, oh, look, I'm a great parent. I've raised a falsely empowered codependent. This is a super child. Well, I know your heart was to do that. But what you raised is somebody who's in tremendous pain, and you don't see it and they don't see it, and it's going to come out everywhere when they become an adult. And I just find that sad. And it's only because we don't teach about this, not because the parents are bad, but they just didn't know. And that's why I do this. It's not to hurt people. It's to get people to know, to get people into reality and truth so we can decide, yeah, maybe I want to do something about this. Okay? Now, sadly, the falsely empowered version of the adapted wounded child is what our society thinks is a healthy adult. This is also the voice that most people consider their adult self, and they'll use this voice to parent the other parts of the younger wounded child. And they'll pride themselves on being mature, yet they are an adult wounded child. And this voice sounds just like the falsely empowered abusive parent. It attacks them. This is what we're doing to ourselves. When you're berating yourself, you've just jumped to the falsely empowered parent. This isn't you. This is your adapted wounded child speaking for you. You've lost your authentic self. You're using your parent's voice that's filled with shame, it's carried shame that's dumped into you. This is why you're an empath. This is why you're attracted to narcissists. This explains your life. This is codependence. That's why I say we're all codependent, because we all talk to ourselves this way. This is how we all treat ourselves. None of us are in our authentic self. We're all in our wounded and adapted wounded child, bouncing back and forth. Severe levels of codependence, yet we think we're an adult. So we attack ourselves, we neglect ourselves, we refuse to relate to the inner child inside of us. We either indulge the impulses that we have or the escapades that we go on. This damages and ignores our boundaries. We do this to ourselves repeatedly, physically, verbally, sexually, intellectually, spiritually, every area of our life. This is the falsely empowered parent that we are using to destroy ourselves. This is the scary part. The falsely empowered that our society thinks is the success. Like the model we've been shown, remember how I said earlier, that shame will send someone either mostly disempowered or falsely empowered. And so that we think the successful people have figured it out, but they're filled with the exact same self-loathing and everything. They're just using the shame to achieve, so that it's all other and outside esteem, because their whole life is based on what they achieve and how others see them, right? And so that's why people think it's a narc. Well, it may be, but in most cases it's not a narc. It's a falsely empowered codependent who's obsessed because they still need their parents' approval, because they created an adapted wounded self that goes, oh, the way to survive my dysfunctional family system, I'll be the super achiever. And so now I'm a politician, actor, actress, football player, whatever it may be. I make millions in finance, insurance, real estate, whatever it is. All of it is, and our society goes, there, they figured it out. They're the ones, I need to emulate that. Oh, goodness, no. Because here's the problem. These people will rarely change or get help. Because why? As a client said to me once, Kenny, why would I deal with any of this? I have the 4 W's. Women, wealth, watches, and wine. There's your falsely empowered codependent. But Kenny, I have the corner office. But Kenny, I have a trophy husband or wife. But Kenny, I have the 3 kids in private school. But Kenny, I have the Bugatti. But Kenny, I like all the trappings of success. I wasn't ready. I had a woman in her 60s, I want to preserve her anonymity. She did a lot of competitive things. Well, she was getting to the age she couldn't compete, and she was falling apart. Her whole life had been based on being around successful people, money, achieving things in this certain activity that she did. Well, she's getting to the age she couldn't do it anymore. She had no self. None. She'd been living in her wounded and adopted wounded child and was in the elite of society. So-called had it all figured out. And when I started walking her through this, I'll never forget the look on her face. The reality of, oh my God, I'm in my 60s and I have no clue who I am. What do I do now? This was all for show. It was devastating for her. Absolutely devastating. And this is why this is so tragic, because this side of the codependent scale that we think is the healthy and has it all figured out are the most difficult to treat, because they have all the trappings and they use that to stay stuck. This is the most destructive, the most toxic, and most difficult to treat. And people often confuse this falsely empowered codependent with narcissism. I'm going to be doing a video on what a truly functional adult looks like. But a truly functional adult interrupts these voices within us, parents them both back to moderation and maturity and self-love and reality, helps them see that their view of the world is skewed, that they are playing the victim, that they are manipulating and controlling, and learns to love themselves for their perfect imperfections. It's okay to be human. They don't have to control anymore from the one down or the one up position. They don't have to manipulate and be, manipulatively nice or controlling and condemn, all the, the polar sides. They can accept that they're perfectly imperfect and regain their authentic self. And as I said, I have a video coming up that'll walk you through that process. So, I know this video is a mouthful. All of us are codependent. All of us have a wounded child in us. All of us developed an adapted wounded child. Many stay mostly the disempowered. Many stay mostly the falsely empowered. And many bounce between the two. You wonder why your life is crazy and chaotic? Probably because you're bouncing in between the two like me. All right? None of this is bad. There's nothing wrong with us. We're just human. And we've never taught this stuff. So we're just doing the best we can with the information we've been given. So I don't know if you need to change any of this. Maybe you just take and go, okay, so this is why I do it. Good enough. Like, I'm not advocating everyone has to change to, accept, my version of what the world should be like. I don't know what the world should be like. I'm not God. I'm not that powerful. That would be very codependent and falsely empowered for me to think I know. I just provide this so you can make sense of your life, so that you're not in so much pain. And then you can decide, okay, now I'm in reality. I'm in truth. This is why life is a B-I-T, This is why it is. Okay, it finally makes sense. And then it's your choice what you want to do with it. So I'm just here to bring you truth and reality and let you decide what works best. Now, if you decide you want to tackle this and you want help on how to do that, my suggestion is to sign up for my free masterclass. Go to my website, www.thegreatnessyou.com. The name of the masterclass is Your Journey to Emotional Mastery. It'll give you the beginning steps to start healing the pain from the past and reclaiming your authentic self. All right? That's free. If you'd like to make a little bit more investment in yourself, pick up this book by Pia Melody, Facing Codependence, so you can get into more truth and reality of how you are stuck in the wounded and adapted wounded child and bouncing between the falsely and disempowered codependent positions in your life. And everyone is. This will help you make sense of the world. If you want to get into reality that, yes, you did suffer trauma and abuse in childhood, all of us did, that trauma and abuse is guiding every aspect of your life, and you're repeating it against yourself. That's what we do. It's called the worst day cycle. I wrote about it in my book, Your Journey to Success. This too will bring you into reality and life will make sense. These two books together, you'll go, oh my gosh, okay, I get it. Now, if you want to go deeper on the codependence aspect and really invest in yourself, I have 3 master classes that are at the same website, thegreatnessyou.com. Levels 1, 2, and 3. You can buy the bundle about the master classes, all 3 of them together if you want, and save some money. But those walk you through the complete process of all of these dynamics, these codependent dynamics, so you can decipher, wow, he's right. That is my wounded and adapted wounded child, and this is my authentic voice. This is who I really am. This is no longer my pain talking. If you'd like that healing recovery work, then you can find those classes on my website, thegreatnessyou.com. If you think this will help somebody, please share it. Leave me your comments, and as always, enjoy the journey.